In Bolivia, President Luis Arce urged unity in defense of the nation's democracy. Russia affirms that its exclusion from the G20 is impossible following the Ukrainian parliament's attempts to promote Moscow's expulsion from this organization. The UN warns about the increase in civilian casualties as a result of violence attributed to irregular armed groups after at least 613 people were killed in 2022. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Bolivia, President Luis Arce reaffirmed the value of unity to defeat coup actions and warned that social organizations will defend democracy in the streets. During a farmers' rally in the department of Chuquisaca on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the Single Federation of Workers of the Indigenous Peoples of that department, the Bolivian president denounced the right-wing's pretensions to lead the nation and returned it to the times of the 2019 coup d'etat. Likewise, President Arce pointed out that the right wing uses the population and housing census as a pretext for these destabilizing acts. In this context, the head of state reiterated that his government remains united with the Bolivian people in their struggle to defeat any attack on democracy and institutionality. In addition, during an act, the Bolivian president reiterated that right-wing forces are once again seeking to destabilize his government and stressed that despite these stabilizing movements, he will continue working for the Bolivian people. President Arce also announced the enactment of Supreme Decree 4824, guaranteeing that the population and housing census is carried out on March 23, 2024, following the violent incidents that took place in the city of Santa Cruz, encouraged by groups related to the region's governor. The Puebla Group expressed its rejection of the imposition of unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela. In statements to the press during the 8th meeting of the political and academic group made up of representatives of Latin American political left held in the city of Santa Marta in Colombia, the ambassador of Venezuela in Colombia, Felix Plasencia, referred to a written document issued by this group in which its member leaders expressed their condemnation to the imposition of unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela. In such sense, all the countries demand the end of such measures. By means of this document and in a more general context, the need to relaunch a financial architecture in Latin America and the Caribbean adapted to its needs and without impositions that threaten the sovereignty of the peoples is highlighted. In Argentina, the attorneys for the Vice President Cristina Fernandez will question Judge Maria Eugenia Capuchetti on Monday, who is investigating the case of the attack she suffered on September 1st. Attorneys Jose Manuel Ubeira and Marcos Aldazabal will present the magistrate's refusal to advance in the investigation of the link of the National Deputy of Juntos por el Cambio, Geraldo Milman, with the assassination attempt as the core of this disqualification. In a message published by the Vice President via Twitter, she pointed out that there are numerous clues linking the legislator with the group Revolución Federal and the attack. Among these clues, she mentioned that last August 19th, Milman had presented a bill in which he mentioned that there would be a false attack to Cristina, insisting also that the Vice President's custody was excessive. In Colombia, 2 indigenous leaders were murdered this Monday in the department of Chocó. According to the Institute for Development and Peace Studies, armed men murdered the victims, identified as Francisco Sarco Pipicay and Carlitos Uraga Macano, inside a house in Quibdó municipality. Both were active members of the indigenous guard of the Embera Playa Bonita community and belonged to the Association of Indigenous Victims of Chocó. According to In the Past, 162 social leaders and human rights defenders have been assassinated throughout the country so far this year. Seven university students were dead and at least 1 gunman was on the run Monday following weekend violence that struck 2 U.S. campuses in the states of Idaho and Virginia. Police were hunting for the student suspect in a shooting that left 3 people dead and 2 others wounded at the University of Virginia, about 160 kilometers southwest of the nation's capital. UEA President Jim Ryan said in a statement that the student at the university, identified as Christopher Darnell Jones Jr., was suspected to have carried out the shooting on campus Sunday night. More than 3,000 kilometers to the west, in the Rocky Mountain state of Idaho, police were investigating a separate incident in which 4 students were found dead Sunday in a home near the University of Idaho campus. School shootings are alarmingly common as part of a broader wave of gun violence in the United States, where the proliferation of firearms has skyrocketed in recent years. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The Russian government assured that its exclusion from the G20 is impossible after the Ukrainian parliament showed its attempts to promote Moscow's expulsion from this organization. In statements to the press, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko pointed out that it is not possible to exclude his country from the Group of 20 and reiterated that these claims by Ukraine are political exercises, nothing more. And in this regard, he recalled that the G20 is much broader than the Western partners. This comes after the Ukrainian parliament called on the G20 member states to exclude the Russian Federation from the organization. The Russian government also banned the entry of 400 Canadian citizens. This was announced by the country's foreign ministry in response to the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's decision to sanction Russian leaders. The foreign ministry said that the list includes mainly high-ranking officials, businessmen, activists of organizations, Ukrainian politicians, and collaborators of Nazi Germany during the Second World War, as well as representatives of the media and financial structures involved in the creation and promotion of anti-Russian policy. The governments of France and the United Kingdom signed an agreement to increase maritime police patrols to contain the crossing of irregular asylum seekers through the English Channel. As part of the new pact starting on Monday in Paris, London will increase to £63 million, which translates into some $74 million a year. The funds it provides to the French police for patrolling the northern coast of that country, and the acquisition of surveillance technology, including cameras and helicopters. With this, the neighboring countries' law enforcement agencies will also be able to increase by 40% the force they allocate to these tasks. The signing of the agreement, which would be an extension of the existing pact, came a day after it was reported that so far this year more than 40,000 people have crossed the English Channel in rubber dinghies to seek asylum in British territory. The Spanish Ministry of Interior reported that the strike called by the National Platform in Defense of the Transport Sector is progressing without incident. The strike began early on Monday morning in Madrid in an indefinite way to demand the government to comply with its commitments with the transport and freight sector. According to the organizers of the strike, the measure of force responds to the non-compliance of the government with its agreement assumed with the unions and organizations of carriers during the demonstrations in March. They also denounced that the authorities have not been vigilant in complying with the laws that control and prevent the carriers from working at a loss. Chinese President Xi Jinping urged U.S. counterpart Joe Biden to put bilateral relations back on track in order to promote world peace and stability. This follows the meeting between the two leaders during the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. In this sense, the Chinese president expressed his hope to achieve, together with Washington, a common agenda for a healthy and stable development. Xi Jinping also stated that the current state of China-United States relations does not coincide with the fundamental interests of the two countries and their peoples, nor does it match the expectations of the international community.
The current situation between China and the United States of America is a concern for all of us. This situation is not in line with the interest of the peoples of our two countries, nor does it satisfy the expectations of the international community.
The world expects, I believe, China and the United States to play key roles in addressing global challenges from climate changes to food insecurity, and for us to be able to work together. The United States stands ready to do just that, work with you if that's what you desire. So President Xi, I look forward to our continuing and ongoing open and honest dialogue we've always had, and I thank you for the opportunity.
On Monday, dozens of climate activists at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt protested to pressure Western industrialized nations to pay for the destruction caused by climate change in its most vulnerable nations.
To show our demand through dance, because these are the young people taking up on their stand, they are stepping up and they are leading the climate movement just to ask for the world leaders to listen to us, set up the facility for loss and damage.
We need to accelerate ambition on the solar rooftop initiative in the European Union, because this will not only help us stop investing in a terrorist regime that is causing climate destruction, but also to make sure that we act on energy poverty in Europe and beyond.
More news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. The UN warns about the increase in civilian casualties as a result of acts of violence attributed to irregular armed groups, after registering at least 613 people killed in 2022. Through a communique, High Commissioner Volker Turk informed that these are the highest figures in the last 5 years, with acts of extreme violence blamed on the jihadist organization Al-Shabaab, tribal militias, and state security forces. In the document, the official states that at least 315 Somalis have been killed and 686 others injured as a result of explosive devices, most of them perpetrated by Al-Shabaab. The High Commissioner also urged the parties to ensure the protection of civilians and criticized the attacks of the jihadist organization against houses, wells, bridges, and schools with objectives that have nothing to do with the concept of war. The Sudanese government declared a state of emergency after more than 24 people were killed in a tribal conflict. The government's decision was declared on Sunday night as two warring tribal gangs fired live ammunition at the Reconciliation Commission that was sent to resolve the tensions. The clash began last week between the Misereya and Al Rashid Arab tribes in villages near Salingay in the west of the country. Darfur continues to be periodically rocked by violence triggered by territorial disputes and difficulties in accessing water, among other factors. Israeli forces killed a young Palestinian woman in the town of Beituna near Ramallah on Monday after carrying out several illegal arrests. A military convoy stormed the town in the middle of a raid. During deployment, the occupants shot at the woman who was inside her vehicle. Although the preliminary report stated that the victim tried to ram the heavy Israeli military tanks, a second statement accepts that they opened fire for no apparent reason. The incident occurred just hours before the extreme right forms government, amid escalating violence that has left more than 180 Palestinian citizens executed this year. The Iranian Foreign Ministry denounced France's failure to fulfill its responsibilities in the fight against terrorism and violence. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani condemned French President Emmanuel Macron's meeting with an opposition group in the Persian nation. In a statement, Kanani called it a flagrant violation of France's international commitments in the fight against terrorism. The spokesman added that Macron's support for the protest is a cause for regret and shame and will remain etched in the memory of people who are well aware of the selective and anti-human rights policies of some European leaders. The Iranian diplomat also rejected the stance of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, noting that Germany shirks its international responsibilities by not respecting the sovereignty of states.
As for the interventions of foreign countries that caused damage to Iran, or the attempts played by their nationals in the riots, judicial measures have been taken and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has contacted the countries concerned through diplomatic channels. In cases where a complaint on our part was necessary, we sent it to the embassies or summoned the ambassadors of these countries, providing them with evidence and asking them to send us their country's response.
On Monday, Afghan Taliban leader Hibatullah Akhundzada ordered officials in the penal system to fully implement Islamic Sharia law. Hibatullah called for proper investigation in cases of robbery, kidnapping, and sedition, and investigations that reach all the requirements of Sharia retribution. The magistrates are obliged to apply it. The supreme leader referred to the offenses considered by Islamic law as the most serious ones, for which different penalties, including corporal punishment, are provided. The list includes adultery, false accusations that someone has committed this crime, but also alcohol consumption, theft, apostasy, and rebellion. On returning to power, the Taliban promised to be more flexible in the application of the Sharia, but quickly returned to a very rigorous interpretation of Islam, which marked their first period in power between 1996 and 2001. And the week-long countdown to the World Cup in Qatar began on Monday as the world's leading footballers focused their attention on one of the most important sporting events in the world. After a last weekend of action, domestic leagues paused for 6 weeks for the global showpiece, but preparation time is short for the teams. The first World Cup to be held in the Arab world will kick off on Sunday when the host nation faces Ecuador. Holding football's showpiece event in a desert state has necessitated an unprecedented reorganization of the international football calendar, shifting the World Cup from its normal slot in the Northern Hemisphere summer to avoid the Gulf's scorching heat. We have a disclaimer to announce. Our Facebook page has been hacked and currently displaying content out of our agenda and against our social, moral, political, and informative promises. We stress teleSUR English is not responsible for these posts that violate Facebook's community standards. We hope this company will give us back our credentials as soon as possible and resume our regular posts on that social media. We have come to the end of this news program. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social medias on Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Arce. Thank you for watching.